May the words of my mouth and thoughts of my heart be acceptable before you, God, my rock and redeemer. Shalom Aleichem, Beruchim Abayim. Welcome everybody to our How to Live a Godly Life series. This is class 7 in our series, and tonight, for making a time marker, is Wednesday, 23rd of May, 2012. Countdown towards what? I don't know if anybody does. Well, anyway, needless to say, I hope I'm your host, Ariel Tzadok. You find me online at KosherTorah.com. And we are right now in the middle of a series of topics from our textbook, which of course are the Legends of the Talmud, translated into English. The book's called in the original, Ein Yaakov. We're using the Finkel edition, and we are on the bottom of page 661 in Tractate Sanhedrin on the topic of the coming of Mashiach. We are in the middle of discussing not prophecy, but prediction. And if you all remember from our previous class, we made a very, very strong distinction between the two. Prophecy comes from God. Predictions come from man. Now, predictions, unlike prophecy. You see, there's true prophecy and there is false prophecy. But again, to summarize prophecy is real simple. Thus saith the Lord. When the Lord speaketh, that is prophecy. If someone speaks in the name of the Lord, that which he did not say, that is false prophecy. Now, you have a lot of people today who claim that God speaks to them. Yep, the Lord told me this and the Lord told me that. Well, that really is getting close to the issues of false prophecies. I think the vast majority, if not everybody who says that, probably would be better off with the psychiatrist and medication than anything else. Because a point that's even understood in Jungian psychoanalysis. When people have deep contact with elements within their own unconscious, that which we can call a higher self, he was able to recognize that such an experience was an internal experience, which he calls a pneumenosis, like an enlightenment. He didn't want to draw any conclusions about anything supernatural or outside the individual, but rather that an individual is in contact with something deep within themselves, which is so far removed from the conscious mind and sense of personality that it appears to the conscious mind as if it is an other. Alright? So, many a time, this is the definition of the meaning of having a angelic experience, a spiritual guide, Magid experience, or what many people believe to be an experience of God. Now again, Jung addressed this issue exclusively within a scientific psychiatric setting. I don't think he wanted to go into the realm of actual mystical experience of the world beyond, but we're not here to discuss Jung, so I'm not going to go and speculate about his ideas or expand on them. Other than to emphasize to you, just because someone has an experience doesn't mean that it's godlike, or anything of the kind. It is what the person believes or thinks that it is. And that's what we must understand. Now, we can apply that to all the people in today's world. And this I do want to mention right here from the beginning. Messianic speculations as to when the Messiah will come. When he is going to ride in on his white horse or white donkey, depending on which point of view you prefer. And he's going to come like Mighty Mouse out of the sky. Here he comes to save the day. Well, when will that be? No one knows. And that's a point that we're going to learn tonight. But that has not stopped numerous others from saying, I have my predictions, which are again arising from a conviction deep within themselves, and which they then project into every single form of attempted justification to validate and convince others that this is true. Predominant today, of course, are the internet speculations. And as is my policy, I never mention names, as you know. But there are a number of these Messianic speculative websites who have, through the years, stated the year 2000 Messiah is going to come, and then 2001, and then this year, and then that year. And some were saying when President Bush was still in office here in the United States that he would be the last president. And some are saying that about Ariel Sharon would be the last prime minister. And needless to say, absolutely positively, every one of these predictions have been proven wrong. Proving that predictive elements are maybe exactly what Jung understood them to be, expressions of one's own self projected outwards, as opposed to anything higher, other, or supernatural. With that being said, I want to make the point here that all of this speculation that you see in the internet today, this one's quoting mystical literature like the Zohar, this one's claiming he is psychic, and this one's claiming this, and the other one is claiming that. When they start to pinpoint things down, then we know we have got possibly a delusion. Wishful thinking, hopeful thinking, self-convinced belief, and the like. And on it goes. As we learned in our last class, and as we will continue to learn tonight, many of these predictions spoken of here are rather interesting in that it seems that many of these could not be fulfilled at any other time in history before modern times. That might indicate to us that now is the time of the redemption. Maybe. And again, maybe not. A point that we know that in the 1570s, how many hundreds of years ago was that? Rabbi Yitzhak Luria, the famous Arizal, and after him Chaim Vital, his famous redactor, wrote clearly that we are in the end of days. Well then, these end of days have been going on for over 40 years. Pretty long time. Who's to say when they will finally end? We don't know. The signs that we're going to continue to read now are rather interesting and rather indicative, but a point that's going to become very clear. Signs are funny things, because even though they indicate that we are in the, if you will, psychological end of the days, what that actually means is that we are in a collective psychological mindset of humanity, wherein which things are in a crossroads of either getting better or getting worse. Now, a point that, again, Jung does speak about is a collective unconscious of humanity. And the collective unconscious of human thought is not limited to the mind of the individual. Is not even limited in space, or for that matter, time. So therefore, one who has such a deep connection can very possibly see the future, feel and sense the minds and thoughts of others, past, present, and future, and therefore pick up on something real. Well, just because we do pick up on these things does not mean that we clearly, accurately, intellectually, academically understand them to the point that we can be definitive in their descriptions. This is why prophecy, predictions are always nebulous at best. So therefore, psychologically, I do believe we are in the end of days. I believe humanity has evolved to the point wherein which the coming of Mashiach is imminent in our evolutionary process. That does not mean that we take out the stopwatch and start counting off days, weeks, months, or years. Because our psychological evolutionary process can take, God only knows how long. And just how long that is a good question that we will endeavor to answer as we continue. We're going to run through the rest of the different individual signs that are spoken of here, starting on the bottom of page 661. And we're going to continue this section and introduce the next section that speaks about calculating the time of the redemption. So it states here, if you remember, we ended our last class speaking about the lack of honesty in society as a sign of the times. And they gave a story about a make-believe city where everyone told the truth, and if you didn't, you died early. Again, an ethical, moral point. But now getting back to the discussion of the pre-Messianic era. The Gemara teaches, we've learned in a Baraita, again, a very authoritative teaching, that Rabbi Noharai said, in the generation when the son of David will come, young people will humiliate the elderly, and yet old people will rise respectfully before the young. Now, you can go back into history, and you'll find that the youth were always considered rebellious, rambunctious, and in many ways arrogant. But it's interesting that throughout history, there has always been a healthy, strong, and stable respect for the elders in society. Whether this is true in classical America, or whether it was true in Christian Europe, Muslim Middle East, or especially in Oriental countries where they actually had ancestor worship. When you were in the presence of an elder, you respected them. You held them in high esteem. That is interestingly gone in modern society. Starting in the post-World War II era, blossoming in the 60s, we saw what became now, in my opinion, a modern-day idolatry of youth worship. Everybody wants to be young. Everybody wants to act as if they are young. Young is cool. Old is uncool. Today, in the modern technological world, young people growing up in our rapidly changing technological society have access through their schooling to all the latest and new technologies, which puts them at the forefront of economic opportunities in the job markets, leaving older people, even 30s and up, at a clear disadvantage of a lack of education of how to deal with all of the new and growing technologies. This has complemented this concept of youth worship. It used to be a time when an elder was respected for who he is. Now, elderly men are bombarded with commercial programming for hair restoration, to look, in quote, young again. Male products for hair coloring. Women's products to make elderly matriarchs desiring to appear as young maidens. Why? When you have 60 and 70-year-old individuals who not only want to look like they're 20, but also wish to act as immature as such. This is a perversion. This is a true reversal of the order of wisdom and the forefront of folly. Youth means inexperience. Youth, like it says, is not ones who know what's going on. Elders have experience. You're not going to have a 20-year-old general in the military, regardless of how good he is with a computer. Now, you might want to put that 20-year-old on a creative project in an advertising firm, but with leadership skills, that's not something you can learn in a classroom or on a computer. Wisdom is not learned, it is acquired. And that only comes with age, with wisdom. And needless to say, that is what is actually despised in the world today. Even in our politicians. If you are a politician at the age of 65 plus and you got white hair and you look old, you can forget about getting elected anywhere. They want you to look young, savvy, thin, and the like. It's all about appearance. This is a sign of the times. The sign of this psychological reversal of what we were discussing. It also continues and says here that daughters will rebel against their mothers. Daughter-in-law against their mother-in-law. That's strange. It speaks about a breakdown of family relationships. And boy, oh boy, more than in the last 50 years, I don't think we've seen it in history where the fundamental family structure is attacked and broken down. And I'm not talking about same-sex marriage or anything of the kind. Even without that issue, people today do not seek the stability and normalcy of the married heterosexual relationship. What does married mean? Committed. It's very easy to have a relationship with a member of the opposite sex. You get together, you fulfill each other's sexual gratifications, and then when things get uncomfortable or you wish to move on to another partner, you just leave. Some people walk in and out of marriages with such ease. This is not the definition of maturity. A family is based upon commitment and foundation. And yet, the prediction here is not a discussion about husband and wife, because those problems have always known to happen. We read about them in Torah. That's why we have the ability of divorce. But one of the closest relationships in human reality, more than a father and a son, is the relationship between a mother and a daughter. Fathers and sons will eventually, sons actually will grow up, mature, and go a different path from their dads. And they become a man in their own right. Men in their own right. Daughters, okay, they grow up, and they get married, and they're faithful to their husbands and children. But dear old mom will always have a place in their lives. And we all know about the jokes about a man's mother-in-law and her intruding ways. That's nothing new. It's always been like that. Because of that unique relationship between women. If that fundamental natural link can be broken, we are undermining the fundamental foundations of human relationships. And of course it says here daughter-in-law with mother-in-law. Because when a woman marries, well, let me rephrase that. The man marries. His wife is supposed to become like a second daughter to the mother. And in the olden days, that was always the case. I remember many a time in which I would see, in a marriage counseling situation, a man's own mother taking the side and defending his wife over himself in sometimes of a marital argument situation. Maybe it's something to do with women understanding women. But when that is broken, and it is breaking today over so many different issues, and that is what is bad and wrong. Where in which women talk against their mothers, they badly about their mothers. I know many women who will badmouth their moms to their face and behind their backs. Interestingly enough, will literally live and die for their mothers at the same time. But even that, and it's a sign of the times. Family breakdown. When the families break down, everything breaks down. The rising of divorces today in society around the world. Religion is no escape. Because in religious circles you have as much divorce as anywhere else. It's a clear sign people cannot get along with one another. Now, a little bit of marriage counseling advice here. Do we ever get to really marry our true soulmate, the one and true love, who will have that romantic love for the rest of our lives as we did the moment we met them? Oh, come on. You believe that? You've been watching too many movies or listening to too many Elvis Presley songs. Well, in reality, that's not the case. What real love is like the movie Fiddler on the Roof, in which Tevye sang to his wife, "Do you love me?" And for 25 years, his wife said, "I washed your clothes, I made your meals, I took care of you." If that's not love, what is? True love is not romantic. True love is a commitment of bond and relationship and discipline and responsibility between two human beings. And therefore, when that bond of responsibility and discipline is lost, everything is lost. It becomes every man or woman for themselves. So, my wise advice to all those of you who are single looking for a partner, if you can't be with the one you love, love the one you're with. And love is not a feeling, it's an action. How you treat a fellow human being. That is what it's all about. When that's lost, and it is, woe to society. Psychologically, we have come to that crossroads which in the mystical traditions they call the 50th level of uncleanliness, from which you can't get any lower. That's pretty much where we're at right now. Moving right along. The leaders of the generation will act in the ways that dogs act. Well, we already discussed that. Arrogance. Complete rebellion and arrogance. Isn't that what we see today? I once heard it recently said in the name of a politician who I'm not going to mention this. The politician said, he was speaking to a clergyman. He says, "You know what the problem with you as clergymen? You have to tell the truth. As for us politicians, whatever we say is the truth. We make it to be the truth." It reminds me of an act of Adolf Hitler who said, "Tell the big lie long enough and people will eventually believe it." That is exactly what people do today. There was a scene in the disaster movie called 2012, wherein which the hero of the movie is dashing to the home to pick up his ex-wife and children, telling them that a terrible earthquake is about to come and they have to evacuate right away. And his wife is on the phone with him and says, "Come on, that's nonsense. The governor right now is on the phone telling us not to panic. Everything is all right." And then he yells over the phone and says, "When they tell you not to panic, everything is all right, that's when you run." No truer words can ever be spoken. Because there is so much lies today. We believe so much lies today. And that is why society is fundamentally broken. Can't get any worse than that. I don't know if the Messiah is going to come on his white horse out of the sky to magically save us and wave his magic wand with twinkle fairy dust to make it all better. Kumbaya. But rather, we can make it a lot worse. A son will not be ashamed before his father. Do we not see that today as well, with all the rebellion of youth worship that we see in the world today? It says we learn in our Baraita continuing. Rabbi Nehemiah said, in the generation when the son of David will come, impudence will increase, mutual respect among people will wane. That's all that we've been talking about. A complete breakdown of societal norms of respect. The vine will produce its fruit, yet wine will be very expensive. Rabbi Frankel brings down here from Rashi, he says there's going to be a shortage because everyone will want to become drunk and down excessive amounts of wine. I think it's a little bit more than that. I think it's a matter of price control. Everybody's always saying how we're in a big financial crisis around the world. Why? What's happened that all of a sudden nobody has any money? We all have production. Production is only increased. I'm not an economist, but for me it means real simple. Production increases. That means product increases. Product increases. That should mean the ability to consume those products increase. Should be a good thing. But what's happening? Well, when you break the appropriate cycle of an economic system, that's when you get problems. I think it was Prime Minister Thatcher of England said, socialism works good. It works great. As long as you have other people's money to pay for it. Now, what happens when you run out of other people's money? Well, eventually you have complete collapse. You eventually then are forced to create a society founded on the principle of economic want, regardless of the facts of economic production. Even though there might be an abundance, you keep back the abundance to keep people in a state of want, so as to keep them repressed. Of all people, George Orwell understood this fundamentally and wrote his novel 1984 based upon this concept and warned about it for the future. And the way that we see things happening in the world today, you kind of wonder, maybe George Orwell has tapped into something deeper, and the ideas and concept which he wrote as a fantasy in a novel, strangely, might be becoming true. Continuing, it says here, the entire kingdom, meaning the civilized world, will be converted to heresy, and there will be no one to admonish the people. Now, what is this heresy? Some people are going to say, well, it's the meaning of this or that religion. Hebrew word, of course, is minut. Some people will interpret minut again as a reference to a specific religion, but no, it's not. It means to a strange orientation. And ultimately what it means to a atheism, a secular atheism. And a point that I have made in numerous writings of KosherTorah and everywhere else, atheism today has become its own religion. Atheism is predicated upon certain theoretical principles, certain fundamentals of faith. They declare that there is no supreme being in the universe. Therefore, there is no religion. Therefore, there is no teachings of religion, which means there's no soul, no afterlife, or anything of the kind. Needless to say, they cannot prove any of this to be true, to which they will just point the finger and say, yeah, prove yours to be true. Well, now you're in one of those impossible situations when you're dealing with issues of faith, what you can and cannot prove to be true, because the mind of the believer is absolutely unwilling to accept anything other than what they want to believe. If you went to a Muslim and tried to convince him to become a Christian, he would give you every argument against you. Talk to a Christian about their religion. They'll give you every argument why their religion is true. And everyone else is the same. And so is the secularist or the atheist. They come up with all kinds of ideas and a circular logic to try to make themselves convinced, because science is on their side, logic is on their side. Yeah. Science and logic is on everybody's side. Okay, thank you. Now, their beliefs are as subjective and faith-based as is any other religion. So therefore I conclude secularism and atheism to be a religion. And it is clearly taking over a large part of the Western world. Pretty much already has. In many parts of the Western world, Europe, United States, especially Canada, expression of certain biblical principles is actually considered illegal. Get you in trouble with the law and the like. It says again that the Baraita supports Rabbi Yitzhak, who said that the son of David will not come till the entire kingdom converts to heresy. Here's an interesting idea that I've toyed with. I don't think it's a stretch of the imagination to consider that we might have a nuclear World War III in the not too distant future between a Muslim pushing east and a secular atheist or Christian world west. And if such a war were to occur, I believe we can rest assured that the destruction and death toll would be far greater than anything that we saw even from World War II. World War II had a death toll of 60 million. We have 6 billion people on the planet. I think that we could literally lose 4 to 5 billion people in the world, maybe even more, in an all-out nuclear war. I do believe, with or without the coming of the Messiah, humanity would survive. But what would be the conclusions of a post-World War III society? Would it not be logical to conclude, my God, look at what we did because we allowed religious fervor and extremism to get out of control? Maybe then, as a united humanity, we should all vote out or get out religion, because it is fundamentally destroying the world. Let's get rid of Christianity, Islam, Judaism, of course, because that's where it all started from. And let's go back to a fundamental belief in nature, science, or whatever. Is it possible that such an outcome could occur? I think so. Is it? No predictions from me. Sorry. But I see this in the minds, ideas of many. And I can see the scenario. Because everywhere that you look today about a future potential threat, it is always ethnically or religiously especially based. Big, big problem. Now, skip a wee bit, and I'm going to go here and says, the rabbis taught, says here, that God will take up the cause of his people, meaning the redeemed them, when he sees that their power is gone and that there is no leader or helper. Now this is a very interesting little prediction, and it is actually echoed in an ancient midrash taught the teachings of Elijah the prophet. There's an old teaching which discusses a Messianic precursor who is called the Messiah, son of Joseph. He is to come as a Messiah to fight the wars of Israel and then to die. I have written a piece on the Messiah ben Yosef. Find it on KosherTorah.com in the eschatology section. Unlike many others, I don't know if the Ben Yosef identity is that of an individual or possibly even just a collective for the modern state of Israel. As such, the interesting thing that is taught in this midrash is that with the advent of Mashiach ben Yosef, he is not identified as such, the suffering and dying of Messiah, but rather as an individual, not as a country. He is identified as the true Messiah, son of David. And as Ben Yosef, mistaken to be Ben David, he is killed. He dies. And it leaves, according to the Midrash, the entire people bereft of hope of any redemption and salvation. And then Ben David comes. Says, behold, I am Ben David. And the people say, begone, no, you're not. Our Ben David was killed. You are a liar, and they attempt to stone him. And then he has to go into concealment for a time. Now, people today put a tremendous amount of faith in the modern state of Israel, taking it to have Messianic proportions. Whether it does or not, time will tell. But they are absolutely convinced of the messianism of their beliefs, and that is what motivates their call to everyone to come and move to the Holy Land, and warnings if you don't, etc. And their attempts to take over the government, to make it religious, etc. Well, what would happen if their precious government were to fall in an all-out war which the government lost? Indeed, that would fulfill the Messianic Ben Yosef scenario. But those who hold differently would be so bewildered and overwhelmed, just like those in the days of the Second Temple. I don't know what would become of them. And this is the time when we say, watch for the future. The text continues that the Son of David will come after all the informers abound. People who inform on Jews. They become too successful, so God will indeed bring the redemption, according to Rashi. Informers. We recite a curse against them every day. Informers in Israel, not the state of Israel, but the Jewish people, are those Jews who betray their own country, their own nation, their own religion, their own people. Aside from backbiting, cutthroat fellow Jews like the Gapos, who assisted and worked with the Nazis during World War II, similar to a Mr. George Soros of today, you have many a Jew. And I'm not going to be referencing specific loyalty or allegiance to the state of Israel, because that's a political issue which is irrelevant here. But specifically turn their back on their fellows, turn their back on religion, and become the greatest antagonists of their own religion. They become anti-Semitic Jews. These are the Malshinim. And they take every opportunity to backbite, harm, and destroy. Indeed, there is a website out there today, again, I don't mention names, by an ex-religious Jew, an ex-Lubavitcher, which is completely dedicated to exposing anything and everything bad about Orthodox and Haredi Judaism. That's what he is dedicated to, exposing the bad in this community. I think it's kind of sad. That's what a person devotes their life to, something so negative. But I guess that's between him and his God. These things are happening. They happened during the days of the Second Temple, and they're happening again now. It says here, until the Messiah will not come until the students of Torah become few. Well, we have more people by number today attending yeshivot and other religious institutions. But we certainly have an almost equal and opposite to it, a vast, large ignorance of what the Torah actually teaches, and people who are truly and sincerely God-fearing human beings. It's almost the more religious they become, the less God-fearing, knowledgeable of Torah and spiritual they become. Strange, but maybe it is, again, a sign of the times. Another explanation will not come until the last penny has gone from the purse. Comprehensive economic collapse and disaster. And if you think about it, if you look at the world economy, it just doesn't make sense why that should be. There is enough production to go around. Why is there such a movement to destroy that production? Another explanation says, until the Jews have given up hope for the redemption, as it says, there will be no leader or helper, meaning as if Israel had no supporter or helper. We already discussed that. It says, this is the premise for the statement of Rabbi Zerah. For when Rabbi Zerah found the rabbis occupied in calculating the time of the coming of Mashiach, and he used to say to them, again, people losing hope. Why? Well, you should know. It is now live Wednesday night, 9:40 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And everybody knows, hint, hint, the Messiah is going to reveal himself next Thursday at 2:30 in the afternoon. Now, obviously, I'm meaning that as a joke. But if I was to say something like that seriously, somebody somewhere would run with it. We saw an example of a Reverend Campbell, if I'm not mistaken, here in the United States, solicited millions of dollars from his religious Christian community to put up billboards around the United States saying that the Messiah was to come at a certain date at a certain hour. And he waited and he waited and waited, and then, needless to say, the time came and gone. And then he recalculated. I was wrong then. He recalculated a second time, and I believe in it a third time. Needless to say, this gives people the false hopes. That's why I'm so much against all of these modern-day websites that try to predict and give hope. The Messiah is coming in this year and that year because the numerical calculations that we do with words and verses add up to this and that year. Well, in all due respect, even though we call this the year 5,772 since creation, the calendar is off by over 160 years, and that throws off all these calculations. And I've seen these calculations go on for page after page after page, and hope after hope after hope, each one dashed one after another. And Rabbi Zera very smartly said, come on guys, don't do this. We've learned in our Baraita, again, an authoritative teaching. 3 things come out of the blue. Mashiach, something that you find that was lost, and a scorpion bite. How many of you actually know that you're going to get bit by a scorpion? Here in Tennessee, we got these little itsy-bitsy scorpions. I see them all around. If I was to be running around outside barefoot or sticking my hand in a box somewhere out in my garage without a glove on, you never know, a little scorpion can get you. I don't know if it'll kill you, but it's not anything that can be predicted. It's not something you can foresee. Any more than finding a lost object. Do you really know, okay, I lost my keys, my gloves, my this, my that. It's going to take me 7.5 minutes to find it. No, it's not. You'll find it when you find it. Also, coming of Mashiach, you'll find that this teaching of Rabbi Zera obviously must have been very well founded in the Second Temple period, because we even find a reflection of it in Christianity with regards to Yeshu's teachings about the coming of Mashiach, which may or may not have been a reflection of himself or not, depending on how you look at historical Christianity before it became what it is today. But this concept that the coming of Mashiach is a sudden event is what is important, because it is interesting. We read in the book of Zechariah that there's going to be a big earthquake in Israel. The Mount of Olives is to be cleaved 45 miles wide, east-west. That sounds like a total tectonic plate shift, where earth changes and the like. And it is interesting. Where does the Messiah come from? Aside from the fact that he's born of a mom and a dad, it says that the Messiah comes with, it says, the holy ones. We interpret that to be an army of angels. We think, therefore, that an army of angels comes from heaven, meaning the sky. But there's a teaching in the Tana Devei Eliyahu with regards to this, that the Messiah and his army do not come from outer space, but rather from inner earth. We've spoken about inner earth in numerous teachings. Remember from our Alexander series that we started, we began or had before this class, this series. Directly underneath the land of Israel is supposed to be the holy place. It is taught that there are lost tribes of Israel, the son of David. Everybody's down there. And that when the time comes, whenever that's to be, they are somehow going to be position themselves directly underneath the land of Israel, and through some way and means create an earthquake, tectonic plate shift, ripping open the Mount of Olives into a 45-mile chasm down the inner earth. And then that army is going to rise up out of that chasm from inner earth out to the world. That is how it's portrayed in the Tanakh of Eliyahu. Very interesting. You don't hear about that one. Now, something as magnificent and profound and wonderful and possibly supernatural like that, how do you predict that? When are they going to do that? Well, I got an idea. Let us all go down to Inner Earth. We'll set up a tour, Inner Earth tours. We'll go down through the cave of Machpelah or something similar. We'll head down there, wherever there is. And let's go down, find out who's in charge. We'll knock on the gates of the Garden of Eden. Hi, can we come in on a tour? They'll say, yeah. Do you have a reservation? Absolutely. All right. And we'll go in, we'll ask whoever's in charge, hey, what's going on? Oh, yeah, well, we're scheduled to come on next Thursday at 2:30. Yeah, right. This is why we cannot make such predictions. We are now at a very pivotal point in understanding Messianic predictions. We continue now with a very important teaching. Rabbi Katina says, we're at the bottom of 662 if you're following me in the English, that the world will exist for 6,000 years, and for 1,000, meaning the seventh millennia, will be desolate. As it says, God alone will be exalted on that day, Isaiah 2:11. And Abaye said, 2,000 years it will be desolate, for it says, He will heal us after 2 days, meaning 2,000 years. On the third day will raise us up, and we will live before Him, Hosea 6:2. Wait a second. We were talking about the coming of the Messiah. We were talking about the timing of His coming. And all of a sudden, what do we do? Switch channels? Switch stations? What the heck is all this talk about 6,000 years and 1,000 this and that? As you will see, we have just dropped out the floor from under our feet, and we fall now in a free fall of the most profoundest and deepest teachings that our sages have concealed for centuries, millennia. Just like we know and understand the secrets of Inner Earth, there is also an understanding of the nature of what we call in Hebrew the sabbaticals, the shemitot, the worlds and epochs of human civilization. That there was a fully constructed and advanced world civilization before Adam, and it was destroyed. And that the period processed in a very long time of rebuilding. Now remember, 6,000 years, 1,000 years, these are all symbolic or metaphorical time references, never to be taken literally. If you watch all of these entertainment shows on science and history channels, and they speak of ancient aliens and ancient civilizations, well, something is true about them, that's for sure. We read in many of the ancient books that we have that there was a tremendous pre-Adamic civilization, highly advanced technologically, and that they came to their demise before Adam came here to serve as a Messiah for their civilization. And we, of course, know the story that happened. The concept now of the world existing for 6,000 years and the seventh one desolate. This is actually something reflected, echoed, if you will, in the book of Daniel. And those of you who've never read my Daniel ebook or listened to my Daniel CDs, please do so. You will find that it is taught by our sages that God, through His watcher angels, has a plan and a purpose and a schedule for human history. And that nothing has progressed haphazardly, accidentally, or arbitrarily. But everything is by very precise design and development. And so, Rabbi Katina can say, yep, there's a schedule for the world. 6,000 years, how long that period will materialize in our time, it will be. And then there will be a period of desolation. This is very fundamental. Because the coming of the Messiah, the Messianic era, is a part of this progressive plan. It is the culmination of this progressive plan. We are at a point now in human history where psychologically we can't push the envelope any further than where it is. The next thing to push is a button for a nuclear bomb. Blow it all up. Maybe that is what's destined to happen. But we can't become more depraved at a collective social level than we already are. Think about what is happening now in the world, which has never ever happened before. Now, God alone be exalted on that day, fine. But Abaye teaches it's going to be desolate for 2,000 years. And he quotes here an interesting verse from the book of Hosea. Hosea speaks there. Let's see, I got that here. Yeah, I got Hosea right here. Got to understand it in a context. So let's read it. Verse 1 of chapter 6, Hosea says, "Come, let us return to Hashem, for he has torn, and he shall heal us. He smites, and he will bind up." Verse 2. "He will revive us from the 2 days. And on the third day he will set us up, and we will live before him." This is considered to be a prediction that the days of exile, from the time of our exile from the land of Israel in the days of the Romans, 68 AD, would only last for 2 days. But a point that is made clearly here, the day of the Lord is 1,000 years. That's the part I didn't read yet here. Let me read that real quick. We learned in a Baraita that supports Rabbi Katrina's view. Just as the sabbatical year causes the land to lie fallow 1 out of 7 years, so the world too lies desolate for 1,000 years out of the 7 millennia. It says God alone be exalted on that day. A song of the Sabbath day, meaning the day, totally Shabbat, where all creative activity ceases. And it says, "For 1,000 years in your eyes is like a bygone day," Psalm 90 verse 4. So therefore 2 days is 2,000 years. Now if you want to start predicting things and putting dates on things, that would mean 2 days is 2,000 years, judging or dating from 68 of the Common Era. And that would mean that we still got a few years to go. Or if you wanted to date it from the days of the Babylonian exile at 586 BC, zoom that up 2,000 years, and that'll put us somewhere around the year 1400 something or other. And maybe that's ballpark about the time, give or take 100, 200 years, that the Ariel said that we were living in the end of days. But either way, what this is teaching us is, again, there is this schedule for the development of human history. And that is what I want to talk about. You see, if human history is actually recorded, past, present, future, and that whatever powers that be are in command to bring about a predestined future, then by tapping into collective humanity through the processes of expanded consciousness, tapping into the collective humanity, we tap into that which is our collective future. And that is why every civilization, every culture throughout history has always seen an apocalypse. Everybody knows it is our destiny. Everybody knows it is our future. Is that future today? Is it tomorrow or far off? We don't know. But it is inevitable. It is a part of humanity. Now, will this apocalypse be fulfilled in the form of a nuclear world war? Not necessarily. Everything perceived in the psyche, remember, does not follow its literal interpretation. It could ultimately be the psychological destruction of rational consciousness as we perceive it today. That would be interpreted in the mind as an apocalypse. I believe that that is true. But I also hear echoed in my words the words of our Rabbi Abraham Yitzhak Kook from his book Orot, which warns how civilization, which has always been predicated and founded on falsehood and lies, can never stand forever, and that ultimately must collapse and be destroyed. And therefore, think about this. Aside from a nuclear world war and how we would rebuild society afterwards, let's say we had an actual natural disaster. The big sunspots or sun activity, the likes of which even a movie was made called Knowing, where everybody got killed. Well, let's say everybody didn't. Or we had a complete electromagnetic pulse, wiped out all energy in the world. And needless to say, we would have tremendous civil unrest and upheavals in the world. And let's say, again, we get through it. Let's say everything physically in the world starts to go. Earth changes. Shifting in the earth and its axis. Tectonic plate movements. All the likes. You can go online, you see all this stuff online. How would we as a race deal with this? No, not like in the movies by building big arks or spaceships or anything of the kind. Because just like in the days of Noah's Ark, all the king's horses and all the king's men and all the government plans, if there be powers that be that are behind this, rest assured they can take care of all those things too. Ultimately, humanity would have to evolve and change to survive the new situation. And maybe that would require of us an expansion of human consciousness to alter the way that we perceive our world and to learn to interact with it differently. That is a scenario you better take into account. The Kabbalists tremendously speak of the work of tikkun, and that when the Messiah comes, many of the predictions will be literally fulfilled. Death will be no more. Uncleanliness will be no more. Fundamental genetic changes will occur in the human race and in the world at large. When Isaiah speaks that the lion will lay down with the lamb, while you have the likes of Maimonides who interpret that symbolically, others who say no, it's quite literal. The spirit of hostility will be removed. How? No. It says God's word will be etched in our hearts. The new covenant, the true new covenant, Jeremiah 31. No longer will man have to teach men, know the Lord, for they will all know me. It's going to put us rabbis out of a job. No one's got to study Torah anymore because we will all know it. No, it doesn't mean you're going to remember chapter and verse, but we will intuitively, psychically, be in tune and one with the natural world. Think about what it must take, or what it will take, to alter humanity so fundamentally to make that happen. The whole world is destined to go through this shift. It is unavoidable. And this is what we must focus on. What is this clock? Well, a lot of people have written a number of things about this. You can find works in many of the rabbis that speak of how the 6 days of creation will echo the 6,000-year period. And again, the dating of these years is more symbolic, and I don't like the idea of trying to pinpoint years and times, because as we have seen, every one of them is wrong. But the point is, society arises to a level, and then creative activity like the sabbatical year, like a Sabbath, ceases. Does that mean there's going to be no creative activity during the Messianic era? That during the Messianic era we're going to go back to primitive Stone Age time? Well, as we will see when we proceed in, I guess, now our next class, it doesn't mean that at all. Because the Messiah is supposed to come before this 7,000th year. His period of time is supposed to be before this. And then this period of shallowness lasts. Now, what does that mean? Some are of the interpretation the Messiah comes, we have the Messianic era, and then there is an ultimate destruction, and then a rebirth. You'll find that scenario recorded in the original Jewish but later Christian tradition, recorded in their book of Revelations. Yet, our Jewish scenario doesn't necessarily say that. It does say the Mashiach comes, and then humanity is to evolve to a higher physical / spiritual state. And that collectively, that which today we call the physical will evolve to a higher construct of physical. This is the ultimate tikkun. We call this the resurrection of the dead, the New Jerusalem, the new heavens and the earth that Isaiah speaks about. This is a period which comes after the Messianic age. And whether we are still on this physical earth or not, or a parallel dimension of earth, that's another story. There are very interesting teachings here peripheral to this. There are other sections in the Talmud that states that the righteous in the world to come are going to inherit hundreds of worlds. Some interpret that to mean that the soul of the righteous will actually be reborn as stars and will shine in heavens as a sun and be responsible for the development of planets and all the life forms that will be on it. Indeed, we are taught that angels today are similar life forms even now. We will see what this means. We don't know. But ultimately, our future is something out of this world. Reminds me almost of a story, one of the earliest stories of the famous science fiction author Arthur C. Clarke. He wrote a very interesting little novel. You never read it, I recommend it, called Childhood's End. It tells the story of the aliens coming down and, beat mankind into shape, not with war and everything, but make a one world government, get everybody together. And the long story short, they hang around for a couple hundred years till finally they see a massive birth of an entire generation of children who are completely psychic. They are literally out of this world. Their minds are traveling simultaneously in space and time, and there are millions and millions and millions of them. The angels, the aliens' job, they take them, they gather them all from mankind, put them all on a single continent. And they reveal to the rest of mankind, this is the future of humanity. These children are the future. Everybody else, you're all old-timers, no hope for you, you're all gone. Everybody else, kills themselves. These children, millions and millions of them, start to act in unison, in almost a collective hive mind. And they literally transform the earth into a complete parallel dimension of energy. And they traverse to another dimension, take the earth with them. And it's a very interesting little story, but it kind of makes you wonder if there's any echo of that in what we're saying here. And maybe this isn't the future we're talking about. Maybe this already happened with the other civilization that existed before us. And why there's such a devastation and destruction, where in which that civilization, we have left rocks and questions. And how many years between the epoch and the highness of that civilization to ours today. Some say 10,000 years. Some say more, some say less. I don't know. But it's interesting to consider. Because if there's any truth to this, then it shows that the divine clock, which is marching forward, is definitely coming to another great cycle. And we have a very exciting future if we can get through these end of days. So on that note, let's conclude tonight. And the Ezrat Hashem will pick up in our next class for next week, continuing talking about the 6,000 years and what it means, and introducing some calculations of our sages which didn't seem to come true. And we'll continue on this topic. So on that note, I'm going to conclude. Thank you all for joining me. God be willing. We'll see you all next week for Class 8. Thanks all for joining me. Kol Tuv. Shalom. 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 Kol Tuv. Shalom.